Hello everyone, this is Ali. Welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about dependency injection extension function, how you can get pro level on that. I'm saying pro, it's because this is what Microsoft use. This is what the big companies use. This is what the others use, and this is maybe what we should use. I'll just show you a couple of examples of how you can create your dependency injection for mostly ASP.NET Core Web API projects, where creating dependency injection extension function to increase their readability is super important. In this video, we will be creating a credential service, as you might just see over here, and try to add extension functions on top of that. While doing that, I'll just point out a couple of points that where you need to focus on more than the others. And before we go dive into that one, I'm just going to ask you to subscribe to the channel, and if you like that content, please hit the like button. It is going to help the YouTube algorithm to promote my channel to be seen by the others like you. And if you find that video useful, or if you somehow have any other question or comment, please add a comment in the comment section below. I'll just try to read and react accordingly. Let's start the example. So I have an interface over here, credential service. It is super simple. User permission model. It returns get user permissions by user ID. It doesn't matter what it is, but I'm just going to try to make it useful for you, for all of us. So this might be one of the examples of the services that we have. And the second service is the validate user permission. It just checks if that user has the permission or not. The models over here is are like permission model, ID key, and user permission model has user ID and list of permission models. It is super simple. And within that interface, within that service, actually, we will be implementing these two, but with mock data. All right, let's implement that. So get user permission. Actually, let's return a fake data. I mean, this could be something like that. Could be 1 or 2. Let me wrap the arguments. So it could be something like that. We get the user ID and create a new permission model with list of this. Maybe we will add a new permission. Let's say read, write, and execute. Let's say. What is the second parameter? Is key ID. I'll just get this off. And I'll add GUID.new GUID, something like that. That would work, and we can actually get rid of these two. Actually, I don't need you two. Okay, so we have 3 sort of permission, and we will be returning this. And maybe this function will be getting the permissions, all permissions. By calling that service. You can use somehow cache, but this is not related to that one actually. So user ID I'm passing, and return if all permission. Why this is task? Okay, let's await for this and make this async, and all permissions any, maybe another string comparison by order, or ignoring the case, but it is not that much important. So as I'm now returning a fake data, in the real case, in your real project, that might be an HTTP call. So maybe you're calling an HTTP, you're making an HTTP call, get the result, check the result, if it is success or if it is not. If so, read the data from the body and do some stuff. But the main thing over here that you probably will be going some external stuff. It can be database, it can be external call, it can be local file system. It really does matter. In that case, imagine we are gonna have to make HTTP call, right? So let's say we have HTTP client here, private read only I HTTP client. Let's say not I, but HTTP client. Let me disable that GitHub Copilot. Let's say we have HTTP client, and let's create a build or configure HTTP client. This is gonna be function, and maybe from the constructor I'll just call that one configure HTTP client function. So within here, I can say, okay, I'll just need to create a new HTTP client. And I can say, if it is read-only, let's say the base URL will be, it's going to be new URI, HTTPS example.com/API. This is going to be the base URL. Let's say, I don't know, HTTP client default headers add API key or X API key. Maybe we will need, and maybe we will need X API version. So this will be API version. So we might need a few things, but imagine we are not doing it. So we have the HTTP client where we get the permission and make, I don't know, get async something, the rest, let's say the rest of the URL. And we will be making call, we will get the result and we will check it. If result is successfully completed successfully, but this is gonna need to await. That's why. And it is, I don't know, is success status good? Do something. If not, do not something. So here you probably will have to go to somewhere. Maybe you will need to go to database. Maybe you will need to do something else. But what I try to point out here is that you might need additional data. What data? For example, what is your base address if you're going to make an HTTP call? What is the API key header? What is the API version? If it is, let's say, a database, what is the connection string? What is the table? What is the entity? What are the filters? So once you need to inject these services, for example, let's go to API version. I mean, there's a web API over here and our service library. This has been referenced over here. And in program CS, for example, let's say I want to add the service builder services add scoped, for example, credential service and credential service. Okay, this is the service I've injected. So wherever I want, I can inject that and use it wisely accordingly. But in here, you might need additional parameters. So you can say, okay, this is easy. I can implement configuration. I can read the parameters from here. That could be it. So that could be a good solution in your case. But is there a better way? Or maybe while injecting, we need to do some sort of stuff. For example, we know HTTP client shouldn't be created implicit over here. Maybe it is, we are gonna create it from iHTTP client factory. Maybe while injecting this service, we will be injecting that HTTP client too. So maybe there will be probably other services that we require. Maybe in that application, we don't have the configuration interface implemented in, maybe removed later. But while injected, if you assume that you will have configuration in here, you might just fail. It's because it is not being injected. So it is going to give you a runtime error. So what I mean here is that once you inject one services, it might need the others as well. Within that case, actually, we can create a function where a user can call and we will do everything we need. For example, if we need configuration with this, we will make sure that it is being added. If we need, I don't know, any other services, we will make sure we need it. If we need the HTTP client, for example, we will ensure that the HTTP client is there and configured. For this, for example, as I just said, it could be HTTP client, it could be something else. Let's say HTTP client service needs an option model. Let me try to add an option model over here so we can use it later. Something like credential service option model. Let's say I need to configure my model, the base API URL, API version, and API key. So this is gonna be somehow be something that I can read from here. Let's say I have the option model here. Now I'm gonna use this to configure. Let's say this is gonna be my base API URL. This is gonna be my API key. This is gonna be the API version. So I will be doing this, right? So in that case, if I have that one, which is required for that service, wherever I inject that one, I will be injecting these two. How can I inject that? So for example, if I'm reading it from configuration, let's say we have a configuration section, we can say builder services, builder configuration, get section, and this is the section name, right? And then I don't know, we can say builder configuration services configure it. I want to configure something, that model with that section. I can pass that section. From now on, I can use that one wherever I want with an I option model. I can use it with directly. I can use it. I option snapshot. I option monitor. I can use that. So now I'm able to access this one. This section might be coming from here, as I just said. So if you have these data in the configuration, but what if you're not? You don't, or is there any other way we can do that? If it is injected that one, so in here, for example, I can say I options, for example, and option model, and then you set the option model with its value. I can read that. But again, we are basically giving that responsibility to user. Wherever they inject this one, they will have to inject these two. If they skip this one, for example, if they don't inject that one, you're gonna have an exception over here. It's because it is not being injected within config. It's not being configured yet. So user shouldn't know about this. I mean, the user, not you, but you're creating a library, and there is third-party user over there using your library. If you are creating some sort of library or services, you need to give the less responsibility to user. You're gonna give it some function when they call, and they will inject everything is whatever required. If you give that opportunity to user, they will probably find a way to fail. It's because we all know we are that user too. So once they add this one, they will need to remember this one too. But we don't want that. So we want to give them a function only, and they will call. And if we require additional parameters, they will have to pass those parameters if it is required. Maybe it's got a default value in your services. So if user doesn't pass anything, you can assume, okay, this is the default value. But if they want to customize that, they should be able to. So in our services, as I just said, we can do many stuff. But imagine we have something like extensions, and we have dependency injection extensions. Within that one, for example, I'll just create an extension class where we have we return service collection, for example, add a credential. This is gonna be my service function. So this will be static 2. This will be an extension function for service collection. Let's say services. Okay. Now, instead of my user calls this one, they will be able to use builder services, add credential service. They will be able to call this one because of that namespace is missing here. Let me add this one, and so it will be okay. So now I'm gonna do this one into this one. So let me do that and return that services. And this will be services too. Okay, I take the responsibility from the user and I'm doing it. The only responsibility for the user to do is this one. If they call this function, I will be doing the rest. So what I need, again, I can do this thing. So I can read it from configuration directly. But what this causes is user has no idea that you're reading it from the configuration. So it doesn't know, they don't know if they have to have that section in the configuration. So it is basically some sort of hidden configuration reading. So it is easy to miss. User wouldn't know that they will have to have that section name with the required parameter for that one. That's why instead of reading secretly, reading behind the scene, you can ask user to pass it. right? So you can ask user to pass that model to your function. Let's say, let's go over here. And this is the first function. If I inject that one, and if my my client requires something like that, for example, instead, I get rid that off. Instead, I can just try to use something else. Like, I don't know, maybe I will just use this one too, but I need to understand where and how I need that one. So if I need that one in my credential service, I can inject that one too. So for example, I can say services add singleton, right? So I'm just going to create this one and create a new instance of that, and I'll inject that one, for example, or wherever they pass to me. So I can inject this one as a singleton, right? Not function though. Oops. Maybe I am injecting a new instance of those. Okay, in that case, so my credential client can inject this one directly. It can come from the dependency injection. But if I need that object only to initialize something, for example, in here, I can have HTTP client, right? So I can create HTTP client with these options and pass that HTTP client to this. So that would be easy. So let's say I'm now gonna create services at HTTP client. So if I say here, I want to create an HTTP client for that credential service, in here, it is going to say, okay, give it a name. You can give it a name, or give me a function where I pass that HTTP client and you configure it. So I can say, okay, I want to configure that with some parameters. What is the parameter? So I'm gonna read that model. Let's say I read that from here, option model, right? So I'll use that option model to configure the client. Let's say base address, new URI, with this one, for example, base API URL, right? So let me get the rest from here. Actually, that could be the same. Let's cut this, paste it here, not HTTP client, but client. So I did the same option model, read the API, key API version, but this time I'm reading this model from a parameter. So user have to pass this parameter to me. It says credential service option model. You will have to pass. I can say, okay, pass me whatever you have. Maybe they will read it from builder configuration. Oops, configuration base URL. I don't care. As the owner of the library, I don't care where they get this project. Maybe they read it from file. I just say I require that one. My services, one of those my services requires that value, so you have to pass. Within that case, I'm basically avoiding some mistakes. It's easy mess. Okay, this would be that one version of that. So in that case, I added HTTP client service in my service now. Instead of using that model, I can get HTTP client from here. And instead of configuring it, I can get rid of this. It's because I've done it already. This HTTP client equal the one HTTP client I'm getting from here, right? Everything. So if still, I might need additional parameters here. Let's say, I don't know, the permission table, maybe the permissions, whatever you have. So you can still do the same thing. You can inject and use this one and so on. So, and this could be a read only too. But what I did is use the configuration model to configure the HTTP client and pass that HTTP client to this one by adding HTTP client to the system. So now my credential service is able to use this one. I don't need to inject this one anymore, but still I can still do that, right? So if they pass an option model, I can use that one. So wherever they want, wherever I want as the owner of that library, I can still use that option model wherever I want. So in here, even I can inject that one too, and with the side of HTTP client. Okay, we've done something over here, and let's, yeah, just make it a bit smaller so you can use. So this could be one version. In here, what the user did is they create and something new. But let's say there is a default values for that one, and we want user to be used that let's say default values. I'm not sure what is the default value for base API and base API key, but let's say we have. So what we can do is we can say, okay, they're not gonna send anything, but I'm gonna need that option model, right? So here, let's say I create that option model. Where is it here? On default options, let's say, and I have created a new instance of this, and I don't know, did something, and I can say, okay, I want to return that add service and services and that default option. So now I am calling that model over here. It's because I have the logic here. I just need to pass an option model by using this. So I've created one and passed this one. You might have something like that over here that returns the default version of that. So let's say public static that returns this one will be default, create default, and return a new. Maybe you have the default versions over here. Default, maybe you have something else, API key. It doesn't matter. Maybe you will need to call that create default function. It will be returning this one. So you can still extend your extension functions, right? So in the first version, they don't have to send this parameter, for example. That would still work, that builds. And additionally, they can pass a new instance of option model. But what we see here is that they give me an ability to configure the client that they give me. I didn't have to. For example, over here, now I have to create an instance of this, but in here, I didn't have to. They give me something so I can use. I can still do the same. So let me copy this one, edit here. Now, additionally, I say there's an action over here, and you will have to, I will pass that model to you. Let's say option action. You will provide a function that accepts that model as a parameter, and you will be configuring it. So here, I will have an option, new instance of that. I will be able to create that model. Maybe you will set the default values again for this one. And then maybe, again, I can do this one. I can pass this option here, but this option needs to be filled out. This option needs to be configured. That's where that option invoke, I'll pass that option, or option action. Directly you can pass the option. Both does the same. So now I am creating that model. I'm getting the responsibility to create that model. Maybe I create that model with, again, create default with all the default versions, and giving the opportunity to user, giving the opportunity to configure that by invoking this. And I'm using the same option, services, and same extension function I had here. Now, in that case, not only user is able to use the default version, the new instance model version, but also, let's say, option, but also they will be able to configure it, something like that, option API version v1, and then the option base URL and URL. They could be doing the same thing. So this is the most common version that we use. It's because even here, while adding this HTTP client, I was able to have or use a function, an action that accepts the HTTP client, and I was able to configure it. Let's check the others. For example, they just says, okay, the default HTTP client I'll be requiring. I'll give you basic HTTP client. You will be configuring it later, as it doesn't accept any other parameters. Over here, it just asks me for a name. Over here, it just says, okay, this is an action. Over here, it also gives me the ability to pass the service provider. So we can still use that. We can still do that over here. So let me copy this and say, okay, this action not only accepts that model, but also accepts my service provider, right? I'm gonna have to pass that service provider, whatever it is, passing it over there. But in that case, to be able to access that service provider, you will have to use one of these service providers provided to you. What I mean is, let's say you have, let me copy this. You can just tidy it up later. Let's say we are doing all of this stuff here. So here, for example, at HTTP client, so where I will need that model, right? So this HTTP client also has something like that, configure HTTP client, but also it will give me the service provider, so I will be able to access. So I can do this one here, right? And I can say not only HTTP client, but I require service provider too. So now I will pass that service provider to that function too. And the rest will be, let's say, option model and option model, option model, option model. So I don't need, do I need this? Yes, I need this, but I can create this one here out of scope. And by just doing the invoke, so user will be able to use the service provider and option. And that option actually should be option model. Where is that option? Yeah, okay, I don't need these one. So I have injected this client and I have created this model with the default value. I injected the HTTP service. I pass that parameter to users so they can use service provider plus option model. Getting the service provider is the only way over here, and like that. And also I added this option model too. So now user here not only able to use that option here, but also they can use service provider too. Now everyone is happy. SP, maybe I will get another service from here. Maybe I'll just get iConfiguration and use it, right? So maybe I'll just read this from configuration. So I might need the service provider. So this is actually the way that even Microsoft does, even pros does. So you can still extend your ability over here. So you can extend your extension functions. Let me show you a couple of examples. So for example, you can add OpenAPI with the default versions. Microsoft says, okay, call that function. I'll just handle the rest. But for rate limiting, for example, if you want to use the rate limiter, so I don't know, maybe your options over here, rate limiter option, it is again the same. There's an action here, rate limiter option is passed to you, so you can configure. You can configure it with add fixed window limiter, but this function, for example, has default version too, so you can use the default version. In that case, the option over here will have the default version, default configurations. So you can call add fixed windows delimiter with the others. Over here again, another action, as you can see, so you can configure it. It is easy. It is easy to read. It is less risky, as I just said. If you give the opportunity to user to miss that configuration, it is easy to use. It is easy to do. And the other option would be, I don't know, output cache. There are a bunch of other options like that. So they give you the builder, so you build it. But if you don't build that builder, if you don't configure that builder, there is always a default case for that one. In our example, in credential service, there is probably not gonna be default version. It's because there's an API address over there, API key. So you will have to force user to pass these parameter. Maybe this is not a good option for you. It's because it's an option. I mean, it can still be. This is not the good option. Where is it? Yeah, this one. This is not a good option for you. So maybe you want to exclude this one. It's because they will have to pass these parameters. This is actually where you can get the details. There is one more trick that I want to mention. And this is easy to miss as well if you're working on some library projects. Let's say this is a NuGet package, right? So You created a NuGet package for your project, for your users, and they will use it. So what they normally do, and let's say the for example service here is this one, right? So the namespace for this service library.services, let's say this is the NuGet package name. When they install that NuGet package in their project, if they want to access that iCredential service, for example, they will have to add this one into the using section, right? So it's because for me to be able to access, let's say, iCredential service here, I will have to add these services here. It was the same for extension. So let's say I've injected this iCredential service and I added this one, but if I don't have this namespace over here, I wouldn't be able to access this one. But I've already added your NuGet package into my project. What else should I do? In that case, I force user to add these extensions too. Where does this extension come from? It is coming from that directory over here. It's because whatever you created under that directory will automatically have that namespace. But if you want your functions, extension functions, to be found easier, what you would do, there is two ways you can do it easily. First, you can just put your extensions under the main directory. So wherever they have that services, they will be able to use this one. So now this credential, where is it? Here. So it is now in service library. If they already added your service library in your using section to be able to use the iCredential or the other services, they will be able to use everything underneath that library without adding any other stuff into using section. This would be it. So you can put those under the main directory. It is the same for credential. If you change, for example, if I get this credential to the main directory in my program CS, I wouldn't have to do anything else except that service library. Once I have it here, I would be able to access everything out under that path. What you can do is, as a second option, you can still put those wherever you want. You maybe just don't want to change your folder structure, you just follow. But you may want to change the namespaces instead. For example, you want that extension functions, wrong by the way, this is gonna be here. And dependency injection will be going to extensions. Yep. So you want your extension to be founded easily. That's why you will just need to change your namespaces, and in program CS, again, if they have that library over there, that's all, they will be able to access your extension functions. So you basically expose your extension functions via the main namespace, under the namespace. That would be a lot easier for the user and easier for you too. That is the whole point I just wanted to show you. This is how pros do. This is how big companies do. This is how even Microsoft do. So Microsoft give you the ability to customize your builder, but if not, they will still be able to use the default if it is possible. It was possible for this one. It was even possible for this one. It might not be possible for your services over here, but you can still make you can still force user to pass the required parameter instead of trying to read it from my configuration or somewhere else. And you can still expose these parameters out. So you can, if you have multiple services, something like that, you can still access all of the configurations later. If you like that video, please hit the like button. If you have any question or any comment, please let me know in the comment section below. Until the next video, happy coding.